Hello, everybody. My name is Ami G. I use the pronouns she and they because I feel like I'm moving out of she and getting a little more open-minded to this way of thinking of the divine masculine and the divine feminine that live inside of me and each one of us, and opening to that non-binary gender way of thinking. So I go by the pronouns she and they. I live on occupied Abenaki land on Turtle Island, currently called Brattleboro, Vermont, United States of America. And I currently hang the shingle of radical self-acceptance coach and trauma and grief support coach. So I'm not going to go over all this. I just put this slide on here so that you have the idea, at least, that I have some experience in training. So what I'm going to say comes from some research, and it might be hopefully valuable to you. I do want to tell you that I have these offerings that are free that I love people to come to, and if you're interested, you can talk with me later or just come onto the website and find this movement group and the mindfulness-based meditation group. So we're going to begin with grief as an opening to self. Self with a big S, something larger than our personal self. So I want to start by saying that we all have baggage that we carry around with us. We don't necessarily understand all the baggage that we have, or even the degree to which we carry the baggage. Some people carry a lot more baggage, historical trauma baggage. Some people carry more current things that are going on. And so I just want to be in solidarity right now to say that everybody has some level of stress, trauma, loss, and grief. We're all carrying that together, individually and as a cohesive group. Every human being is carrying something. And I want to be in allyship with those especially who I don't carry as much baggage as them maybe. I want to understand that I can be an ally to someone to try and unload some of their baggage. And I want to figure out how to be able to do that, because we all want to have less baggage together. So I'm hoping that today what we get out of this is to broaden our understanding of racialized, historical, and persistent trauma, to deepen our spiritual allyship towards systemic change for equality for all, to engage in experiential activities that help us, and if you work with other people, to help them release stress, heal trauma, accept loss, and allow grief for the purpose of wellness. And to hopefully we'll have time to create personal rituals toward a synthesis of grieving with living. And I'm hoping that people can, if you can, stay for an extra 30 minutes after we're done. So we'll be here till 2:30. And right now, before we start, before we go on any further, I'd like to do a little tuning in with you. So just take a moment. You might want to close your eyes or soften your gaze. And we'll tune out the outside of our world, our vision, and tune into the inside of our world, our inner vision. Maybe slow down the breath. And maybe exhale a little longer than your inhale. And notice the breath. Notice how it's air around your body. When it first enters the body, it might feel like a little tickle at your nostrils. And notice it as it comes into the body, maybe as air coming in and out of the nostrils or the mouth. Notice the temperature difference, if there is one, from the air coming in and the air going out. Notice how the breath is in the back of the throat and inside the mouth, between the top of the tongue and the roof of the mouth. Notice the breath coming all the way into the lungs, filling up the lungs all the way up to the collarbone, all the way to the back, filling up the inside of the rib cage, all the way down to the diaphragm, the muscle that's tucked up under the ribs. Notice how the diaphragm pushes down when we inhale and the belly expands. And then notice how everything comes back with the exhale. Everything tucks back, the diaphragm tucks back up, the ribs knit back together and tuck back in. And notice how this breath is breathing your body, like the tide of an ocean, breathing in and out of the ocean, the energetic field that we're all breathing in and out of. You might want to consider that you're inhaling oxygen and it's being used up and it's being turned into carbon dioxide, and you're exhaling carbon dioxide into the air. And the plant world is inhaling carbon dioxide and using it up and turning it into oxygen, nitrogen, exhaling it into the air, the energetic field. You're inhaling that oxygen. Maybe take a few breaths, noticing that or considering that symbiotic relationship between you and maybe a plant around you or a tree outside. Consider that you're sharing this breath, these breaths, with other two-leggeds and four-leggeds and no-leggeds and many-leggeds. That you're sharing the breath with the elements, with water and earth and air. That you're breathing in from the past, breathing out into the future. And consider that there are things in this energetic field, just like oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange, that we can't see or feel or hear or taste or smell. Consider that there might be things in the energetic field that are like peace. And breathe that in. And breathe that out. There may be things in the energetic field that you most want to be able to fill up with. Imagine that they are there for you to inhale right now. Whatever comes to your mind that you most want to be filled with, breathe that in. Breathe that out. Notice as you're breathing in and out of this energetic field, breathing in and out this quality or these qualities, that there's barely any skin between the inside and the outside. Start to feel immersed in this quality. In this energetic field that we're all breathing in and out of. And I invite you to start blinking your way back into your outer vision and bring with you this inner place that you've just touched on. If you start to lose it, blink back in and come out slowly. Because in our culture, we're not born and raised and taught to maintain our inner being along with our outer world. So we have to practice that. Practice allowing ourselves to be seen and heard from our inside out. Practice being a witness to each other as we are. Maybe start to wiggle your fingers, move your arms and stretch out. Come back into the space. Bring yourself with you. And we're going to begin by talking about stress. So stress is necessary for standing and moving, and it can be motivational. I find that if I have a deadline, I will get things done. If I don't have a deadline, I don't always get it done. Accumulating stress is also inevitable because we are complex human beings. In psychosynthesis terms, we have in our psyche looks like an egg diagram that has all this unconscious material that we're going up and down and around and trying to understand ourselves better. We have these subpersonalities that are tucked away, and we're dichotomous beings. And then we live on a planet of 7.8 billion or so people who are each one that complex. And we're coming to understand more and more that we have cumulative and intergenerational, historical, racialized trauma that is embedded in our cells, in our chromosomes. And we're affected by the collective unconscious. Right now, the collective unconscious, that energetic field that we're all breathing in and out of, is full of a lot of trauma. It's full of COVID-19 virus and the pandemic, environmental crises, political divide, personal things, collective things. So you can think of it like we're all holding a figurative glass that's being filled with stress. And it's filling up throughout the day with all different ways of being stressed. And we each are holding this glass thinking, I got it, I can deal with this. But it keeps filling up and it gets to the top. And all it takes is one little thing, somebody not turning on their blinker or something that just splashes the water out of the glass. And that one little thing feels like a traumatic stressor. And we feel like we're exploding and we're reacting and we got kicked into survival mode, which means that our ability to reason and use our critical thinking is decreased. Our ability to make good choices is decreased. So we can't really prevent stress entering the glass, but we can manage it. We can know that it's always going to be filling up and try and pour out some stress every day. Empty the glass whenever we can. And I also added this move towards systemic change because there are some things that are just unnecessary stress that are part of our systemic way of being in the world. And if we all work on changing that, we can wipe out some of the stress or at least lessen it for a lot of people. So to pour out some stress every day, it's good to move things, to move different bodies, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic. And right now, what I'd like you to do is just find your notebook or journal or paper and pen, and maybe have a fresh page and just write something like things that release stress on the top of the page. And start listing the things that you know help you. And as I'm talking about things that I know help me, there might be something that you want to add to your list. And you go ahead and put anything on your list that makes sense for you. So Gabriel Roth once said, the fastest way to still the mind is to move the body. So moving the physical body is a really great way of moving stress out. In psychosynthesis, we use something called the psychological functions to look at ways to get to know ourselves better. So let's look at sensation, at body sensation. Where do I feel stress in my body? And how can I move it out? And just tuning in sometimes. Where am I feeling stress in my body? And then the next question, how can I move it out? So here's my list that I started. Walking in nature tends to be something that works for a lot of people, and it works on different levels. So it's physical movement. It's also touching the earth, which gets us connected to something larger than ourselves. It's also being in nature, which reminds us of our own nature and our connection to being a natural being. It's also a good way of processing, just walking and thinking and processing and breathing. Touch is another great way to decrease stress. And right now, in times of COVID, we don't all get enough touch. So I'm going to invite you to touch yourself. Put your hands right on your skin. Maybe give yourself a little massage. Massage your neck and your shoulders and your arms and your legs and your lower back. Reach around. Touch your belly, touch your chest. Feel your heart space. And throughout this workshop, I invite you to come back to the things that you can do while we're meeting together, touch being one of them. And I want to just say too that sex is a great way to release stress. So if you can't have sex with somebody else and you can have it with yourself, you go for it. That's one of those taboo things for some people, and I like to give people permission. Also, if you're having consenting sex with some other adult and you're able to do that, beautiful. Great way to release stress and great way to feel intimate. Dance is also a great way to release stress, and there are many forms of dance. Right now, I just want to say that some of these slides are going to have things that when I send the slides out, you can go back to it and watch it. We're not going to watch everything right now. Gabriel Roth started this ecstatic dance, also called the wave, also called the 5 rhythms. It is one of my favorite ways to release stress through dance. And when you get a chance, I suggest you come and watch that. Try it out. You might like it. Contact improvisational dance is also another way to move and feel connection. So you don't have to move with another person. You can move with the floor, with the wall, with the couch. So this is another one to check out sometime. If you don't know about these dance forms and they're new to you, just check them out. And Gaga is another dance form, not Lady Gaga. It's a dance form called Gaga. And it's about bringing ideas into your body and letting your body become that idea and respond to it, and therefore moving your body in different ways that free the body up from certain ways of moving. When we think about dance, sometimes we think of certain ways of moving, and this gives a little more freedom of form, along with the previous two. Tai Chi is a very slow, connected to the earth, beautiful way of moving. And again, you can come back and watch this sometime and check out Master Moylin Shin's Tai Chi. Yoga is another great way to move, and I've added this 10-minute morning yoga for beginners slide, just so if you've always wanted to try yoga and haven't, this is a great way to start. Check it out. And I put in Pilates because all these ways of moving, if we can figure out, if we can learn about what our core is and feel strong in our core, when we move from the core, we're not going to get hurt. If we bend over to pick up a pen that fell on the floor, we're not going to hurt our back if our core is strong. So my friend Deb and my other friend Louise and I did a fundraiser together. We each took a class. Deb took this Pilates class, and it's a really easy to follow, wonderful class. You're welcome to come back and check it out. And then Louise, who is here with us today, did this brilliant breath workshop called Breathing in Times of COVID. I invite you to come back and watch this. And we're not going to watch it now, but I invite you right now, we're going to do a couple things that Louise taught us. I invite you to stand up. And inhale your arms above your head. Keep your arms up and exhale your shoulders down. Take another breath, and as you inhale, feel your ribs expand. Exhale and hum on the way down. And as you breathe, stay standing. As you breathe, continue to hum on your exhale. And we're going to practice a little Qigong shaking here. So I'm not going to play this, but I'm just going to tell you about it. So you're going to shake your wrists out, shake your arms out of the shoulders. And then we're going to just bounce on the back of our heels. My floor is super squeaky, so it's a little embarrassing. And as you're doing that, let the back of your head also loosen up. Inhale through your nose, hum, sound, or exhale out. And you can continue that Qigong shaking. You can continue inhaling and exhaling with a hum. You can come back to anything that we've done, massage, self-massage, anything that we've done that feels like it's helping to pour some of that stress out of your glass. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Alexander technique, which is a way of being in our physical body that is mind oriented. So it's a mind body connector. So there are a few core underlying concepts to Alexander technique. One is called lengthen. So if you can imagine that your energetic body is much larger than your physical body, and you're inviting your physical body to lengthen into it. So this energetic body is running through your midline, going up out the top of the head and down the legs, out the bottom of the feet, and sort of stretching in both directions. And you're inviting your physical body to do that, to stretch up and down like softening taffy. And it's not anything we do, it's something we invite. And you might start to even feel your vertebrae start to separate a little bit. Maybe giving a little more space between the vertebrae where there might have been contraction. As you invite in lengthening, think about that energetic flow through the center, through the midline, also pulling out wide through the shoulders and through the ribs and through the hips. And invite in widening. You might think of widening from the front body and the back body also. And then undoing is somewhere in your body right now. Just tune in, do a little body scan and see where is there tension that I want to release, that I want to invite to release. And tune into that one spot. We'll just do one spot right now. And give that one spot permission to undo. We give our body a lot of unconscious messages to do. So now let's give it a conscious message to undo, to just be, unwind, unravel, relax, let down, soften. And if you have an experience of that happening, it might feel like cogs of a wheel going click, 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 or shaking, or softening, letting down, opening, lengthening, widening, expanding. Name it undo or undoing, because what we're doing when we do that is creating a neural network pathway between the experience and the word, so that if we practice this enough and have that experience and call it a word, we can then use the word to call up the experience. So another psychological function that we can look at is, what's my need? What's my desire? And I'm going to just say that on my list, one of my needs and desires that I often have is to play and to sleep. Those are two of my needs, to play and to sleep. So I put that on my list of how to pour out stress. So let's now look at the mental body by using the thought. What am I thinking? How can I clarify my thoughts? How can I calm my mind? How can I think more positively? These kinds of ways of thinking. One of the ways that I find that's helpful to get my thoughts clear is to journal. Another is to talk with a friend who I trust, who is a good listener and not a fixer. Another is doing mindfulness activities and or meditation. And when I say mindfulness, I mean being present without judgment. And one way to practice doing that is to choose to do one thing at a time. So if I have a choice to eat my breakfast in the car while I'm driving, or while I'm walking, or while I'm on the computer, or sitting quietly and just eating my breakfast and looking out the window and thinking and being, if I choose to just eat my breakfast and not do it with something else, I'm practicing mindfulness. And it's actually a good stress reliever. You'll find that the more you get out of trying to do more than one thing at a time, if that's you, the less stressed you're going to feel. And I'm going to play this video. This is a short 5.5-minute video. And we're going to try this 1 moment meditation. It's an introduction to meditation, but it's also a different kind of an introduction and a different kind of meditation. So I'm going to mute myself and start this film. And
since you're watching this video, I'll bet you want to meditate but don't have time. Maybe you've tried to meditate but had some trouble. Maybe you had a wonderful experience meditating over there, but just can't find that same feeling over here. Well, my name is Marty Borison, and in this video I'm going to introduce you to the technique of 1 moment meditation. Then you can meditate whenever you need to. Like when you're feeling stressed, feeling angry. Maybe you're having trouble sleeping. Or you're feeling anxious. Or you just need a new idea. Although one-moment meditation is ultimately about meditating in a moment, we're going to start with a minute. We start with a minute because a moment goes by so quickly that it's very hard to notice. But a minute is like a moment with handles on it. You know where it begins and where it ends, so it's easier to grasp. If you're ready, we'll do the basic minute now. You might want to shut the door, or at least tell people you're not available for the next minute. You don't have to tie yourself in knots for this. Just sit with your legs planted firmly on the floor. Try to sit up straight, but don't be rigid. It's as if your head were being lifted up away from the weight of the world. Think of it as cosmic traction. Now put your hands in any position that's balanced, symmetrical, and still. Like this, or like this. During the minute, simply focus on your breathing, moment by moment. Of course, even in the space of a minute, you will get distracted. That's perfectly normal. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. But as soon as you notice that you're distracted, just think, and bring your mind back to your breathing. I'll ring a bell so you know when to start and when to finish. Ready? Then close your eyes. Oh, one more thing. It's okay to smile. And go. As you open your eyes, notice how you feel right now. Maybe a little bit refreshed, a little bit more awake, a little bit more open-minded. Not bad for a minute. And the more you do it, the better it gets. But please don't ever do the basic minute for longer than a minute. Don't be macho about it. Because the point of the basic minute is to show you that you can make a meaningful change in your state of mind quickly. So if you do it for longer, you're cheating. With one-moment meditation, you can also learn how to do the portable minute, which is very useful when you're standing in line, on a train, or stuck in a boring meeting. You can also learn the bonus minute, the surprise minute, and the emergency minute. With one-moment meditation, you can also learn how to reduce the length of the basic minute step by step until it only takes a moment. And when you can meditate in a moment, your whole day can be filled with meditation because it takes no time at all.
So I wanted to add this, we're not going to watch it now, but I wanted to add this 10-minute guided mindfulness meditation with John Kabat-Zinn. He is my mindfulness meditation guru, so this is him doing a guide, which is wonderful. And also I am guiding this one in, and then a 20-minute silent sit, and then guiding out. So if you want to do that, you come back to these slides when you get them, and do this anytime you want. So another way that I find releasing stress through the mind is doing something called reframing. So I have a mindset, and I want to reset my mind into something that's healthier than the mindset that I've been using. So one of those ways of thinking is life will continue to be stressful, and I'm the only one who can regulate my experience to change the pouring out the water, pouring out the stress. Roberto Assagioli talks again about this egg diagram and how we're moving in and out of our unconscious material to expand our field of awareness to become more aware of who I am, and at the same time using these portals to connect us to something larger than the personal self. So understanding my parts and understanding that I'm a part of something greater, which is a different mindset. It helps us forgive ourselves for being human and imperfect and feel connected with that which is larger. There's also this method which I love called the ABC or ABCD method. It's part of a cognitive behavioral therapy toolbox. And instead of talking about it, I'm just going to use an example. So I'm driving in the car. I'm driving at 65 miles an hour on the highway, and somebody is tailgating me. And I start getting stressed. My shoulders are coming up to my ears, and I'm tense, and I'm not enjoying my driving anymore. The reason that I'm feeling this way is because I have a belief system that the person behind me is not paying attention, and they might bump into me, and they might cause an accident, and I might get hurt. And part of my belief system is based on the fact that I have been hit from behind, so that's a trigger for me, someone tailgating. The consequence of this belief system is that I got my ears up in my shoulder, and I'm causing trauma to my physical body and my energetic body and my emotional body, and I'm not enjoying that drive at all. So I can try to dispute my belief system to see if it's going to help me. So some of the disputing beliefs that I've come up with is, one, I have bumper stickers on the back of my car. Someone is in total control and just wants to read my bumper stickers. So then my consequence is, they like my bumper stickers, bro. And I'm waving and I'm going, hey, we're in solidarity. We're on the road together, but we're all in the same bumper sticker boat. Another disputing belief could be, they want to go faster than me. So they're speeding up and they're waiting for the safe moment to be able to pass me. They're in total control. They're not going to hit me. Another disputing belief, which is kind of worst case scenario, is they are not paying attention and they are going to hit me. And me being tense is going to cause worse problems when the impact comes than if I were relaxed. So I'm going to have to figure out how to relax. So we're all having a response to the COVID-19 virus and to the pandemic that's happening because of it. Here's an example of how we can use a both-and perspective. Knowing that that's all true, that people are sick, people are dying, people are having to deal with the consequences of stay at home and not be able to go to work in the same ways and not being able to have friends, be with us and touch us and all the things that we need in our lives and are used to. That's all true. At the same time, there's also another truth. So in the short term, people were calling the pandemic the Great Pause. People were forced to go indoors, inside their mind and their heart. People were forced to walk out in nature more than they would have if they had that opportunity. Spending less time in the car, there was less pollution. People were calling it the Great Pause. And now people are starting to call it, now that it's a long-term pandemic, people are starting to call it the Great Turning. A time where we can focus on healing and awakening. And I'm going to play this song for you, and the words are right here if you want to sing along. It helps us to really kind of get into this other way of thinking.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these vibes. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive in this great turning. We shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these vibes. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive in this great turning. We shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love.
So I put forgive, compassion, and gratitude on my list, not that it's anything that we can necessarily do. I find, though, that when my heart is open, when I open my heart, when I do something like listen to that song and it opens my heart, it's a lot easier to come into forgiving myself and others, and feeling compassion for myself and others, and feeling gratitude for the small things, like being able to take a shower, having a cup of tea, and being with you all today. So another psychological function is feeling emotions. What am I feeling? Just tuning in once in a while. What am I feeling right now? And then once we tune in, how can I move my emotions? So I'm going to suggest that when we say to ourselves, how am I feeling? We start to increase our emotional intelligence by getting a little more tuned into the intensity of feelings. Is it high to low of happy, sad, angry, afraid, ashamed? You know, how many of these words am I feeling right now? And then sometimes just noticing our feeling helps that feeling come up and then move. And then we have another feeling come up and move, and so forth. And we're moving our emotions, they're moving. Sometimes it feels like an emotion is stuck, though. And I've come up with this tool that I call whimper cry. And I'm going to have you try it right now if you'd like. Everybody is muted, so you don't have to feel embarrassed. So take a breath and then sigh your breath out. And then do it a little louder. Give it a little more push. And add a little kind of a cry to it, a whimper. And continue to do that. And as you continue to do this whimper cry, you might find that it either pushes you into crying or pushes you out of crying. It will move your emotion. And as you feel like you're stuck and you do a whimper cry and you move your emotion, it'll move into whatever is next. So this one's a little tricky. How do you move your spiritual body? So I think that it's an intuitive kind of thing. We want to think to ourselves, what am I sensing right now? And how do I connect with that which is larger than myself right now? So in psychosynthesis, we call it accessing the transpersonal, that there are these portals that we can access something that connects us to, we can use something that connects us to our personal self and that which is larger than ourself. Some people use prayer. Some people use art. Some people use music, and I'm not going to play this right now, but when you get these slides, this is 6 hours of music that has been attuned to help us heal. You might want to play that. I play it in the background during the day while I'm home, and I find it very soothing and decreases my stress level quite a bit when I play it. Inspirational reading is helpful. Some people who are Bible readers, you know, they pick up the Bible and they read the Bible. Some people are tea bag readers. Every morning I have 2 tea bags and I read the labels, and that's super helpful to me. In psychosynthesis, there are many, many books that people have written and used to figure out how to access the transpersonal. These are a sprinkling of those books. And I'm sure that you all have your own ways of tapping in. And if you even just read a sentence or a paragraph or a page or a chapter every day. Sorry, I've got distracted by the chat box. When people write to me, it pops up, so I see that. Somebody else is saying that they're a tea reader, tea bag reader, tag reader also. So to move the energetic body, I use my imagination because I don't see my energetic body. I have to imagine my energetic body. And I use different ways of cleansing my energetic body. One way that's thousands of years old is Qigong. I'm not going to do any more Qigong right now, but this YouTube site that Master Ming Tong Gu has a lot, like hundreds of videos that if you want to tap into Qigong, you can try that. There's lots of other ways of tapping into Qigong, but this is one way to start. Donna Eden does a daily energy routine. It takes about 7 minutes. You can come back and look at this sometime, anytime. And I have taken her routine and brought in a lot of my own stuff and added other ways of moving out stress and of cleaning the energy aura and things like that I've learned through the years. And it's an hour-long routine, and you are welcome to watch my version of that, or you're welcome to come and do the movement group 3 days a week. And that's basically what we do. Being in nature is also a way of cleansing the energetic body, because in nature there are more negative ions, and negative ions create positive vibes. And I put in a couple of articles here in case you want to look at that. Especially being around water. Water has a lot of negative ions, which is positive vibe producing. So how do we pour out stress for everybody? That's a tall order. So Krishnamurti said, It's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And our world is broken. There's no question. So how do we create systemic change? Well, I put in a few quotes that you can come back to and be inspired, but ultimately, if you want to journal sometime, not right now, but start another page and start journaling, describe your vision of a realistic ideal future for all, for every single person. List the systemic changes necessary to get from here to there. Create steps and order the steps. Look at the first step and see if there's a way to break it down further. And then what's the simplest thing to accomplish in that first broken down step, and then do it. And then repeat. And then share and find your team to collaborate, because this is too much work to do for one person. We all need to work together on this one. So how do you pour out stress? Add to your list, come back to your list, do your list. Sometimes it's not about doing anything, it's just about resting and being. We are human beings, not human doings. That's a quote from Leo Buscaglia. So here's my list. You can come back and to the slides and look at this list. You can add to it. You can cross out what doesn't work for you. I also want to say that sometimes things just suck, and loving ourselves as we are is good enough. So we can do our best. And then we have to just love ourselves no matter what that best looks like at any given moment. So I invite you to take a physical break. Don't go out of the room if you don't have to, but stand up. Inhale, exhale, inhale again. Hum, do some Qigong shaking, do some self-massage, have a drink. Do what you need to do to move, dance, wiggle. And as you're doing that, I'm going to start talking about trauma. So just the word trauma, or the idea of talking about trauma, can feel like it's traumatizing. So I want to take a moment to recognize that. Recognize that right now, me saying we're going to talk about trauma might be a trigger for you. So just recognize that and take care of yourself. Release stress. Shake it out. Hum it out. Move however you need to move out that recognition of what you just took in, that additional stress. Take care of yourself throughout this whole workshop, and especially right now. So originally, trauma was used to talk about physical injury, and now it's also used to talk about psychological injury. The psychic wounding is psychological trauma. The traumatic episode is the traumatic stressor. These are just interchangeable words that can be used. The key factor in why physical stress and psychological stress are different is the stress, the mental, emotional, and psychic stress. Stress is what makes it a psychological trauma. Physical trauma, like a blunt hit to the skull and a head injury, it doesn't include any more stress than just that first hit. But stress, mental, emotional, and psychic stress, is what makes it a psychological trauma. So you can look at a psychological trauma in three ways: the stressor, the event, the experience during the exposure to the event, and the response to the event. And the response we can be talking about during the event or right after, which is called peritraumatic response. We can also look at how that stressor can be weeks, months, or years after. That's called post-traumatic stress. That's where we get the term post-traumatic stress disorder. So physical trauma can become psychological trauma. I'll tell you a story, which I feel like has a lot of different layers that might feel important to you. Maybe not, but it's an interesting story anyhow. So when I was a little girl, my cousin Sharon came to visit. She was much older, and she brought me to this hill. It was winter, and we went sledding, and I was adamant that I was going to go sledding by myself. I was very little. I was belly down, face first, holding on to the front of my radio flyer, going down this hill. And at some point near the bottom of the hill, I realized I didn't know how to steer and I didn't know how to brake. So I went out into the road, and a car had just started accelerating. I went under the car. I did not get crushed. I did get a head injury. Years later, as an adult, I was in another car accident. I got hit from behind. I got whiplashed, and I had a lot of problems because of that. And I went to see a neurological chiropractor, brilliant person who's up in Norwich, Vermont, and worked with the Winter Olympic ski team. I came highly recommended. Shook his hand when I first met him, and he said, "How long have you had sweaty hands?" And I said, "I've had sweaty hands for as long as I can remember, my whole life." We tracked those sweaty hands back to that head injury when I was a little girl. That when I got the physical trauma to my head, it triggered my fight flight reaction or response to go on a little bit all the time, so that I always had sweaty hands unless I was very, very calm. And if you're someone who has a glass of water with stress in it all the time, you're not always very calm. So mostly I had sweaty hands. And in our culture, where we used to shake hands to greet each other, I got lots of responses about how gross it was that I had cold, clammy hands. And gradually it became a psychological trauma. So psychological trauma is not only held in the mental body, it's held in the physical body. Here we have the nervous system separated into two parts. The central nervous system is the nerves that go to the spinal cord and the brain. The peripheral nervous system are the nerves that go to the involuntary things like breathing and digesting, and the voluntary things like, touching something that's hot, and then the nerve gets the message from our brain to our hand back to the brain to pull our hand away. Under the autonomic nervous system, which is the involuntary side, we have the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. They are both involuntary. The sympathetic nervous system is activated when our body responds to something as if it's a threat, and we get something called the fight or flight response. Hormonal changes happen, physiological responses happen, and that's so that our body can have the strength and the ability to move quickly and to get out of harm's way, or to fight the harm if we choose to stay. What happens is we become more tense and alert. Heart rate, blood pressure, breathing speed up, muscles tense, we tremble. We don't have to go to the bathroom. We sweat, pupils dilate, mouth gets dry, face gets red. These are involuntary reactions to a stressor, or to an even thought of a stressor. The problem is the sympathetic nervous system has to happen very fast because it's saying there's an emergency and we have to respond quickly. But when the emergency or whatever is happening is gone, the parasympathetic nervous system doesn't respond so quickly. It takes a while because all those stress hormones are still in the bloodstream. It can take up to a few hours to recover from that. And in that time, we're feeling stressed and exhausted. And if that happens over and over, if you're always feeling stressed, if always our fight flight response is being triggered, not only are you getting sweaty palms like me, but you're also getting things that are happening that are dangerous, like too much cortisol pumped into the body. So cortisol is great in the short term, but in the long term, it causes susceptibility to infections and cancer and all sorts of things. So we want to get our cortisol level down. Again, you're going to get these slides. I know I'm zipping through them, but you'll get these slides and you'll be able to take your time and look a little more. And I've put in a couple of articles and a website that you can come back and look at, things like the electromagnetic field, which we are right now in the electromagnetic field. So we want to do things to, clean ourselves off after this. So we typically think of trauma as the result of one thing. It's also physical trauma that has permanently turned on the flight switch, which was my example. It's also unattended cumulative stress, which we talked a little about. Trauma can also be the body's response to a long sequence of smaller psychological wounds, like microaggressions. And I'm going to play you a tape because I don't think any of us can truly understand microaggressions unless we think of it in a different way, or unless we have had it happen to us. And a lot of us in our white-bodied skins, we don't understand microaggressions in the same way that those who are in dark-body skins in different groups have felt it. So I like this film. It's short.
For people who still don't think that microaggressions are a problem,
Oh, you're so well spoken.
just imagine, instead of being a stupid comment, a microaggression is a mosquito bite.
Ugh, it's a compliment.
Mosquito bites and their itch are one of nature's most annoying features. But if you're only bitten every once in a while,
No, where are you really from?
Cleveland?
sure, it's annoying, but it's not that big a deal. The problem is that some people get bitten by mosquitoes a lot more than other people. I mean, a lot more. Whether it's on a date,
Oh, your English is so good.
Excuse me?
going grocery shopping,
You know, everything happens for a reason.
I'm just buying apples.
commuting to work,
So when are you gonna have a baby?
watching TV,
We have to keep the Redskins name. It's part of our culture and history.
or just walking down the street with your partner.
I couldn't even tell you were gay.
Mosquitoes seem to pop up everywhere.
Do you know John? Give me shopping advice.
So
I love Cher too.
And getting bit by mosquitoes every goddamn day,
Can I touch your hair?
multiple times a day,
pretty.
Can I touch it, please? Can I please?
is fucking annoying. That makes you want to go ballistic on those mosquitoes, which seems like a huge overreaction to people who only get bit every once in a while.
It's just a mosquito bite. Who cares?
Just another angry black woman.
Of course, beyond just being annoying, some mosquitoes carry truly threatening diseases that can mess up your life for years.
Astrophysics? Maybe you should try this challenging major.
Ow, my dreams.
And other mosquitoes carry strains that can even kill you.
He looked like he was up to trouble, okay? I felt threatened.
So next time you think someone's overreacting, just remember, some people experience mosquito bites all the time.
You're all so exotic. Wow.
And by mosquito bites, we mean microaggressions.
All right. Trauma can also be the body's response to anything that the body experiences as too much, too soon, or too fast, anything unfamiliar, anything the body doesn't understand. So here's an example. Something happens, and it doesn't really happen, but it almost happens, and your body responds as if it happened. Like a truck rushes by, doesn't hit you, but it feels like it could have sideswiped you, and your body responds to that. If you have had an experience like this, just raise your hand. If you missed a step and almost fell down the step, but you didn't, but your body responded like it did. If you've watched a film and you jump out of your seat as if something just happened to you, but it didn't, it's just a movie, even though you know it's just a movie, your body still responded. Raise your hand if that happened to you. So your body acts as if the danger is real, regardless of what your mind is telling you, because your body is hardwired to react to sensation and movement. Trauma responses are unpredictable. Just like some of you raised your hand and some of you didn't for either one of those examples, two bodies respond differently to the same experience. So there is something called post-traumatic stress disorder. There's also something called persistent traumatic stress disorder. This is not something that's in the Diagnostical Statistical Manual, the DSM-5. It's not in that, but it's something that people are talking about is true, which is this persistent trauma that has been happening for eons and is continuing to happen now, like with microaggressions. Or worse. So intergenerational historical trauma is a unique and cumulative embodied loss within groups of people, like Indigenous peoples, Black and brown-skinned people, people in the LGBTQ plus community. And these historical trauma soul wounds affect all of us, not just people in those categories. We are all affected. We're starting to understand this. So for those of us who feel like I'm not affected, we are probably in our comfort zone. And we probably would rather be an ally than to continue causing other people to be oppressed. So we need to get out of our comfort zone to be able to understand that other people are not in their comfort zone, so that we can support them in coming into their comfort zone. And if you haven't been in your comfort zone, you want to come into your comfort zone. And then everybody needs to get out of the danger zone. The danger zone is someplace that is dangerous. It's threatening to your life. It really is. It's not a, I felt threatened. It's actually like someone has a, someone has a weapon, or someone's telling you they're going to hurt you. That we want to get out of the danger zone. If you're in a dangerous situation, get out. That's my suggestion. So it's hard to know the difference between danger zone and constructive discomfort zone. We have to learn what the difference is so that we can be okay with being uncomfortable in our constructive discomfort zone. So to do that, we want to tune into our physical body. Where am I feeling discomfort? When I hear certain words or someone says something to me in a certain way, where in my body am I feeling that? That's the first step of becoming aware. So right now, just notice if you're in your comfort zone or your constructive discomfort zone or your danger zone. I imagine no one is in their danger zone because we're all sitting in a room on a screen. No one is hurting us, and hopefully we're not hurting ourselves. So I imagine that we're either in our comfort zone or our constructive discomfort. Just tune into your body right now. Where am I feeling a reaction? And what does it feel like? Do a little body scan. And continue to do that as I say these words, racialized trauma. Those are two very triggering words, racial, racialized, and trauma. So as I say, we're going to talk about racialized trauma. Just notice where there's constriction in your body, what that feels like. And keep noticing that. So in My Grandmother's Hands, Resma Medicum, he alludes to or talks about black bodies, white bodies, and blue bodies. He says that many black bodies don't feel settled around white ones because of things like the long, brutal history of enslavement and subjugation, racial profiling, murder by police, stand your ground laws, the exoneration of white-bodied folks killing black-bodied folks, outright targeted aggression, and the habitual grind of everyday disregard, discrimination, institutional disrespect, over-policing, over-sentencing, and microaggressions. The expression of trauma that lives in white bodies and the bodies of public safety professionals, which Resma calls blue bodies, is a bodily response that may be reflexively triggered by the mere presence of a black body, or the mere mention of the word race, or the term white supremacy. Notice in your body right now where you're hearing this, where you're feeling it, what you're feeling. Just notice it. That's the first step. Breathe in and out of it and be okay if you're in your constructive discomfort. See if you can be okay with that. We're going to move, stand up, take a breath. Shake, massage, sigh, whimper, cry. Anything that helps you to move stress out We're not meant to sit for a whole long time, so definitely physically move your body. While you're doing that, I'm going to talk about healing trauma. So when we're healing trauma, we want to come into the comfort zone. Rumi said, the wound is the place where the light enters you. When we're concentrating on healing trauma, we want to focus on the light, not the wound. We don't want to re-traumatize a trauma. So if you're feeling like you're getting traumatized, we want to bring that down to comfort. We don't want to deepen and widen the neurological pathway that goes to the place in the head where trauma lives. We want to build other pathways that go to a place where we can have a memory of something without it being tied into the emotional traumatic response to it. And we don't want to cause ourselves or others to be dissociated. We want people to be present and feel more at peace. So what we do want to do is focus on the ability, focus on strengthening that. In psychosynthesis, we call it the unifying center. It's the part that understands that I have parts, and it's the part that understands that I'm a part of something larger and pulls those two ways of understanding together. We want to focus on resilience and strength, and we want to focus on building new neurological pathways, and there are ways to do that. We can talk a little bit about that in a moment. We want to focus on a connection to the present moment, who I am right now with myself and all my little parts inside of me and what they're saying, who I am in relation to others right now, to nature, and to source, whatever that means to you. So constriction points to the place that needs healing. When you feel constriction, it's a call to heal. It feels like discomfort or tightness, or feeling stuck or heavy, or foggy, or feeling emotional pain. It's a beautiful thing when we feel this, because we're going to move, if we pay attention to it, we're going to move from an unconscious way of being to a conscious way of being. We're going to have an opportunity to do healing of the wound and what lies underneath it. We're also touching the wound, which is painful. That's why we haven't been looking at it. So we want to move really slowly when we're doing healing trauma work. So again, in psychosynthesis, we talk about increasing the conscious field of awareness, of becoming more aware of the unconscious parts of myself and my connection to that which is higher or larger. By doing this, by accepting these parts that I'm finding in myself that have been hiding, and I bring them out of hiding, and I say, okay, my insecure part, I know you're there. I'm just going to hold you in my loving arms. You're okay. I've got this. The more I can accept those parts and take care of them, the more I'm a fuller version of myself, and I'm moving into healthier ways of being and being conscious. So one of the tools is called subpersonality work, or identification and disidentification. It's identifying with these parts of myself and then stepping aside and saying it's a smaller part of me. It's not who I am as a whole person. Another one is EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I'm not going to do EMDR with you, and I don't do EMDR, but I know about it. And a lot of people who are psychotherapists and doctors, they do EMDR, and they would be a great person for you to go see if that's something you're interested in, rebuilding the neurological pathway from trauma to having a memory of something without it being attached to the trauma feeling, reaction. So I put in this little video. It's Francine Shapiro talking about how she first came up with EMDR, where that came from, and a little bit about EMDR. You can come back and watch that sometime. And part of EMDR can be tapping. Tapping is also a whole separate tool. So I just want to say before we talk any more about tapping that there are things that we do that increase stress when we're doing tapping. If you have a pen in your hand and you're nervous and you're tapping something, it's very nervous making. It doesn't decrease stress, it makes more stress. If your foot is on the floor and your leg is bouncing, we call it your motor is running, it actually increases stress. It does not decrease stress. But there are ways to tap on our physical body that help to decrease stress. And these are some of them. I've put in links for you later to go and check this out and try different things out. But the one we're going to do right now is this bilateral stimulation, the butterfly hug. It was originated and developed by Lucina Artigas after, I think it was the 1998 earthquake in Mexico. And she was working with individuals and groups of people, and she found that this was not only moving trauma, it was also self-soothing. So it's something that we can do right now, and we'll try it. So cross your hands over your chest. Bring your middle finger to about your collarbone and then spread your fingers out as if they were the wings of a butterfly. In the middle, your thumbs you can cross or just lay down, and that's like the body of the butterfly. And then we're going to alternate the tapping from one side to the other, and this can be fast or slow, whatever feels right for you. And now close or soften your eyes and breathe deeply. With your inhale, your belly is going to rise. It comes back down with the exhale. Slow your breath down. And imagine that you're being transported to a place where you're safe and you're calm. Notice that place. What does it look like? What does it feel like to be there? Have you got your shoes off or your feet on the ground? What does it feel like to have your feet on the ground or the sand or the moss or the water? Feel the air on your skin. Smell whatever you smell. Hear the sounds of the place that you're in. And then just notice whatever comes up. Thoughts, emotions, body sensations, as if they were clouds that were lifting and then passing. No judgment. And you can continue to do this bilateral stimulation, butterfly hug, tapping. You continue to do it throughout. Whenever you decide that you don't want to do it anymore, you can stop, but I'm going to just keep talking while you're doing that. So another wonderful tool is shaking. We did a little bit of Qigong shaking at the beginning. I've put in this website that you can go to sometime and check out this TRE, tension, stress, trauma release. It's a pretty incredible method, which causes we do exercises to cause the muscles to fatigue, and then they start shaking, and trauma is released through that shaking. So whoever signed up for this today, you will get these slides. You don't need to take notes if you don't want to. Another tool that I really like, I call release and replace. I work with someone who his name is Bill Ryan. He's my coach slash therapist slash counselor slash mentor. He does this thing. He's in his late 70s, and he's been doing counseling and coaching for decades and decades. Probably 50 decades, 5 decades rather, 50 years. And he does this thing where I walk into his office and I have something really heavy and I lay it down on the table and he breathes it in, and then he has this big sigh of release and breathes it back out. And I can hear him doing this. It's a very audible sigh. He sounds like that. And then he looks up at a picture or a statue that he has around his room, and he breathes in the quality that he wants to be filled with, because he just got rid of something. Now he wants to fill it back in. So Bill does this thing where he goes out into the woods and he sits by a tree, his back to the tree, and he meditates. And he tunes in with his root system, going down into the earth. intermingling with the tree root system and all the other root systems. And he feels that connection with the trees and with nature and with all things. And he goes back in his room and he has a picture of a redwood, and he imbues that quality so that when he looks at the picture, he remembers what it feels like to be in that state of mind, and he breathes that in. So he releases and replaces. Healing affirmations is also a really wonderful thing. Now, I'm not talking about affirmations like, I'm okay and I'm going to be okay, and saying that and not really feeling okay. I mean doing affirmations every day that are created by you or by someone else who knows what it takes to release and get rid of stress and trauma, to heal trauma. So this website, Meditation for PTSD Health Journeys, is a great place to come. And also I read these 32 affirmations for healing trauma that Bella Ruth Naparstek came up with in 1992, it was. And so if you want to come back and you want to just listen to me reading them, you can do that as much as you want. It's very effective. So we're going to go into breakout groups of 2 people in each group. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to listen to what your partner says to you when you ask the question, what are some healing psychological trauma tools that you've tried and worked for you? Because when we come back, you're going to take what your partner told you and you're going to write that into the chat box, and I'll read what everybody writes. What's going to happen is I'm going to consolidate what people wrote, and I'll add it to this list later. And then when you come back to the slides, it'll be on the list. If you want to stand up, take a stretch, shake out, hum, sound, whimper, cry, whatever, take your break as I continue. We're going to talk about accepting loss. So we all experience losses, large, small, one-off, cumulative, individual, communal, and each one wants to be acknowledged. Each one wants to be grieved. So I want you to show me with your hand up or raising your hand or thumbs up or yes or nod if this is something that you've experienced as a loss, this loss of self. So I explain it as every day there are moments when we lose a degree of hope, love, trust in ourselves, in another, in nature, and source. And these soul cuts manifest as insecurity, a sense of unworthiness, loneliness, loss of self. Or this one, loss of humanity. If you have experienced this feeling of a loss of humanity because of genocide and intergenerational historical trauma and things like that. If you have experienced the loss of unity in our country or in our world, in the political systems. Loss of equality. Now, this group of marginalized people was worded in this way by Willie Garrett, who's the 2020 president of the Minnesota Psychological Association. These are basically people who endure significant disparities in healthcare, employment, legal rights, housing, access to services, etc. Marginalized groups. Loss of innocence. You can raise your hand or yes if you've ever had this experience. Loss of safety, energy, a dream, a lifestyle, culture, a home, connection. Loss of a body part, health, mental health, physical health, ability. Loss of a pet. I thought that one deserved its own screen. Sometimes it's not about loss of, it's about realizing that you've had a lack of something that you never had in the first place that maybe your cohorts or peers have had, like privilege or ability. And then there's developmental milestones. When we hit them, there's a loss of a self-identity that we had. When we don't hit them, We feel a sense of loss about not being included in the norm. Loss from separation or divorce, family strife, a friendship ending. If you've ever had one of those, just we'll be in solidarity with each other. Loss of freedom. There's lots of ways to lose our freedom, incarceration all the way to manipulation. So if you haven't seen it yet, I suggest The Social Dilemma. It's on Netflix. There's a link to it, not to the movie itself, but to tell about it. Talking about how we actually have a great loss of freedom through manipulation of social media and other kinds of devices that we're using. Loss of a healthy environment, clean water, clean earth, clean air. Loss of species and all the impact and implications of those species that are gone. And loss of the feeling of an ecological self. And then there's death. At some point, we probably each are going to experience a significant loss from someone who dies and changes the trajectory of our life and gives us a before and after touchstone. You may or may not have had this already. You may have had more than one. Raise your hand if you have had this experience. And then there's cumulative loss. So multiple loss in a short amount of time, or the accumulation of years of losses. What happens is these are stored inside. And when a new loss comes in, we dip down and stir up the old losses and they start having more significance. If you've had this experience, raise your hand. So what do we do with all this loss? How do we build a tolerance to it? And how do we see it? How do we reframe it? So the Serenity Prayer is something that people usually know about. But what's interesting to me is when Reynold Niebuhr wrote this poem, which was not called a Serenity Prayer, he first, when he wrote it, it started with courage. Give us courage to change what we must alter. And that everything else comes after that. Courage comes first. He also goes on in the poem to ask for the ability to live one day at a time. Enjoy each moment, one day, one moment at a time. And then he says this line, which is, to me, a little more difficult, challenging. Accept hardships as a pathway to peace. So Rumi wrote this poem called The Guest House, and I am going to read it. It's very small writing, so I know for some of you can't read it. It is something that I ruminated on for months because it was hard for me to grasp this. This being human is a guest house. Each morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. It may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. This is sort of a concept that goes along with that I call holy shit. We have an experience and we go, holy shit. And the experience becomes compost, and from it, something beautiful grows. It really is holy shit. So there are people that we can look to understand this, like Viktor Frankl, who was a therapist before he was thrown into concentration camps with his family, his wife, his parents, his siblings, everybody during the Nazi era was killed, except him. And while he was in this concentration camp, more than one, he was helping the people around him to find the beauty of the present moment, to find the peace within their own soul, to help them get through this. Roberto Assagioli, who is the father of psychosynthesis, he was incarcerated in solitary confinement for a month during Mussolini's reign because he was a peaceful activist. He was a peace activist. So he was in solitary for a whole month. And in solitary is when he honed all of his ideas into psychosynthesis, which has become the psychological framework that has been used by a trillion people from past and future. It's amazing that he was able to do that. So I'm no Nelson Mandela. I probably couldn't be in jail for 27 years and come out a leader. I'm not sure I could do that. But I like to hold these people up as something that I can move toward, or hold as hope towards something that, we have resilience. We can do these wonderful things with horrible situations. So Rumi said, where there is ruin, there is hope for treasure. And I want you to consider right now, just take a quiet moment to yourself and consider the gem in a loss that you've had. What is the loss and found? So this is something I'm sure that you could ruminate, you could talk with a friend that you trust, you could journal about. And I think it's important to reframe all the loss into what's the gem that's in that loss? What do we get from that? So again, take an in-room break, move around, wiggle, get wiggly, breathe, shake, whimper, cry. Use whatever tool works for you, tapping, massaging, drinking water. And now we're going to talk about grief. So grief is it's natural to experience any array of emotions when there's a loss, and we call that array of emotions grief. And when we experience this array of emotions, we say we are grieving. To grieve is to be authentic to your reactions to life. Grieving helps dissipate what's held in the body. And grieving is a means to open one's heart to compassion. Again, Rumi, I love Rumi. Grief can be the garden of compassion. If you keep your heart open through everything, your pain can become your greatest ally in your life's search for love and wisdom. In psychosynthesis, we talk about these portals that help us to relate our personal self to something larger than self. And one of the portals is called the dark night of the soul. Usually we go through this portal kicking and screaming and crying. And I want to suggest that crying is a sacred thing. So Antoine de Saint-Exupéry wrote in The Little Prince, it is such a secret place, the land of tears. But I think in his French language, I think what he really was saying is, it is such a sacred place, the land of tears. So the grief process looks different for each person, and even for each person with a different loss, it looks different. Grief becomes more complex with cumulative losses, as we've mentioned. Grieving multiple losses becomes a different kind of a thing than the individual grief of each loss. And some losses create complicated grief due to complicated circumstances. I will say that anyone who has lost someone to suicide, it's a complicated grief. Then there are secondary losses. So this example, say somebody loses a spouse. They've not only lost the spouse and they're grieving the loss of that spouse, they've lost all these other things. Dreams of the future, identity as a spouse, sometimes loss of faith, confidence, financial security, support. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talked about the stages of grief: denial, anger, depression, bargaining, and acceptance. And I don't think she meant it this way, but a lot of people took it to mean that if I get through all of these stages, I'm going to get to acceptance and then I'm done grieving. But it doesn't work that way. Grief goes round and round. It doesn't stop. It's more circular. It's not linear at all. There's no rule book. There's no time frame. There's no judgment. Grief is as individual as a fingerprint, and do what is right for you and for your soul. Sometimes at the beginning of the grief, there's of a kind of an intense reaction to something. There's one or two feelings that rise up above all the rest, but they don't go away once you get through them. They just circle around and more emotions come in and they overlap and they layer, and eventually there's more integration of all these aspects of grief with life. Grief can be like a grief wave where it feels like something is coming up and it takes you. And then you're crying and you realize you've been taken over by grief. But at first you don't even know what it is. And as the years go by, sometimes this grief wave rolls in for months before all of a sudden you're crying and you realize that it was a grief wave. So initially grief waves can be fast and furious. As time goes on, sometimes it is furious, but usually it's with less frequency and ferocity. Grief is like a weather pattern. It's like there's this feeling of things are dissipating. And then there's a feeling of they're starting to come together like clouds. And then there's a feeling like it pours down like a soft cry or a tsunami. And then it goes over and over. This cycle, weather cycle. These feelings can include feeling numb and disbelief, sad, angry, guilty, relieved, accepting, and more. Lots of feelings, whatever comes up is part of your grief cycle. And then there are breaks where you aren't thinking about that person or that thing, and you're just living. And like the weather, grief will continue. It won't stop, but it will change. Grief is dynamic. It will never be stagnant. I have heard so many people say, if I cry, I'll never stop. And I assure them that that's not true. You can cry during the morning, the afternoon, the night, every day for months. But there will be stopping points in between the crying where you're just breathing and just being and not feeling that, feeling something different, thinking something different. I'm not going to play this right now, but the song is a really good one for me to break open my frozen places. You know, our culture tells us not to feel things. And so I have that way of going back into not feeling sometimes. And this song helps me to remember sometimes I have to become a river of tears to be real, to be compassionate, to be human. Grief is like the undertow of the ocean. So if you've ever been taken by the real undertow of the ocean, it sucks you down and then you go out to the sides and then you get spit up onto shore. Grief is like that. It sucks you down and it's sacred territory down there. And then you end up scraped and bruised on the shore. And it's a testament to resilience. We do this over and over and we get through it. I like to say that grief is a beast that will have its way with you. And sometimes it feels like a surprise, like a Mack truck coming out of the side street that crushes you. Sometimes it feels like a black hole. Now, my brother assures me that there's no such thing as a picture of a black hole, but I'm just going to go for it. It's a black hole that sucks your life and your motivation and color out of you and into it. And I love this one where grief is like a blanket, a tightly woven blanket where you know you're inside of it, but you can't access you. It's just about the grief. And eventually the fibers of the blanket start to loosen and more of yourself can access in the outer world. And then at some point, maybe you feel like you have a threadbare blanket that you carry with you while you're walking through the world. So I'm wondering if you think that grief is ongoing, and I want you to agree with me if you do, that grieving takes longer than the allotted time off from work. Grieving is a lifetime job. And whether we tune into it or not, grief is happening daily. It's begging for us to pay attention to it daily. So start this process of changing our norm of not paying attention to paying attention. We first have to just say, grief exists. It's a simple concept, but we often ignore it because the norm is to suppress emotions and ignore pain. And in order to do a paradigm shift, we have to think about authenticity and being whole. That's going to create the new norm. So right now, we're not going to do this as a group sharing, but just for time, I would love for you to take a moment and just say to yourself, I am grieving. And it could be a period or it could be something that you say after that. And just keep rolling with this, I am grieving, and see what comes up and out for yourself. And while you're doing that, I'm going to play this song.
Thank you for hearing me. 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 Thank you for loving 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 me. Thank you for seeing 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 me. And for not leaving me, and for not leaving me, and for not leaving me, and for not leaving me. Thank you for staying with 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 me. Thanks for silence 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 with me. Thank you for holding me and saying I could be. Thank you for saying, baby. Thank you for holding
it's presumptuous for me to tell you how to grieve. I'm not going to do that. I am going to tell you some things that are helpful for a lot of people, though. It's really helpful to be gentle with yourself, to embed a voice inside that says, be gentle with yourself, you're grieving. To allow all thoughts and emotions to rise and fall, to feel your emotion, and when it changes, let go of what just was, and allow this to happen over and over. To support others, it's helpful to be present and listen and accept whatever comes up for life. Know that the grief never ends, it just changes. Find your unique way of understanding and explaining what's going on for you, and we'll try as best we can to accept each other's different processes. Be curious about the grieving process. Become an observer and a student, and see grief as a sacred teacher. Be curious about why others act as they do. Everyone has their story. Everyone is grieving something. Maybe ask yourself, I wonder what's going on behind the scenes. What's their grief story? You might ask, and you might just wonder that and have that kind of energy that you carry around with you of understanding everyone has a grief story. Talk openly and naturally about the thing that is being grieved. If it's a person, use their name. Be real. That person was part of the person who's grieving. They're part of their life still. They were part of their life. They still are. State the obvious. My heart hurts. Grieving is really hard. Saying these things keeps us honest, and it can move a difficult emotion to a less intense setting just by saying it. Check for unhealthy thinking patterns. If you're telling yourself over and over, I can't do this, I don't want to do this, I don't want to be here, you're building a case towards self-destructive behavior or suicide. Destructive behavior causes more problems that need attention later. When you're feeling good and ready to fly, you won't need more problems then. And suicide is permanent. The rawness of the grief wave is temporary. Even if it happens over and over, it's still temporary, and it will change. Find those mantras and replace them with something that is more healthy. Replace something like, I don't want to be here with, this is hard and I want things to change. Now, not everything will change, but some things will eventually change. Keep healthy boundaries. So when we're supporting other people, we want to hold a safe container for that person to climb in, grieve, and climb out of, and repeat as needed. We want to be empathetic, we want to feel their emotion, and then we want to let it go, because they'll be doing the same thing. We don't have to hold on to things for them. If you climb into a container of grief when you're with your friend who's grieving, let it be your own grief, not theirs. The bereaved feel freer knowing that we're both going to come out of this healthy. Seek support and know that you're not alone. Find people who hold a safe space for you, and find people who have similar losses that you can relate to. During the first weeks after a significant loss, I was told this, and I think that it's true. Try not to be alone longer than the time you'd be in a bathtub. That's especially hard right now during, stay at home with the pandemic. So find your visual supports as much as you can through things like this, like Zoom or FaceTime. Also, you can turn up your internal voices of support. Hear your friends' voices. Turn up the internal voice of the deceased if it feels supportive. Imagine these voices listening and holding you while you grieve. Trust when you hear, see, or sense the deceased. If you can accept that as a spiritual support, it's going to feel better. Accept a both-and view. Adopt a both-and view. So grief waves are tumultuous and they subside. You may feel frightened and curious about this new life. Your heart is broken open and love is flowing freely. You miss the person who's gone, if it's a person or a pet or whatever it is. And also sometimes we feel closer to them because they're not here and we're thinking about them more. Sometimes we get to know this person because of the puzzle pieces or the pizza pie that other people have a slice that we didn't have before, and they start telling us more about them. We get to know them more. Grief can be excruciating and it can be sacred. So right now we're going to do this both hand experience. So in one hand, I want you to put grief as if it was a physical thing that you're feeling in your hand. And all the implications, the rippling implications of grief. I want you to feel that, sense that, let that sit in your hand and be part of your system. Let that come into your hand. In the other hand, we're going to hold life. We're going to hold breath. We're going to hold the inhale that invites in something brand new when we don't know what it is. And the exhale that invites in letting go of that which is holding us back. And all the implications of the breath and of life and being alive. And then slowly we're going to bring the palms of the hands side by side, holding these two things in our hands. And just sit with your two hands together, grief in one and life in the other. And take a few breaths. And as you continue to breathe in life and grief and have them both be part of you now, just see how that starts to settle as you continue that process. So I'm just going to recap that we've been talking about releasing stress, healing trauma, accepting loss, and allowing grief. And that they all sort of go together. And then the question is, when can we do this? Do we do it daily? Do we do it anytime a grief wave takes you? Do we do it at a designated time or place? Do we do it all of the above and then some? So if you're ready and you want to, take a little movement break, stay in the room. You can shake, you can hum, you can breathe. You can do self-massage. You can do a whimper cry. And we're going to talk about creating avenues for grief. So rituals are actions that symbolically connect us to something meaningful. They can be comforting, help us express our feelings. They can bring about a sense of closure, and they can keep an important part of the past alive. They honor the person doing them, and they honor that which is gone. Rituals can be elaborate or simple. They can take from seconds to hours, and they can be formal or spontaneous. Rituals have been used in cultures for eons, and even within one culture, the rituals are different. So I'm not going to go through these right now, but I've put in a few different cultures that have similar rituals within their culture. So there's the Lakota culture, there's the Buddhist death rites. You can come back and look at these at your leisure. Jewish culture. And then this is just one little spot in West Africa. There's a whole bunch of countries in the continent of Africa. I'm not going to say the African culture. So the idea about creating ritual is finding the meaning. What would I like it to mean? What settings help me connect to the meaning? Will others present enable me to connect more to the meaning? What actions or activities will connect me to the meaning? So this is something that I want us to do when we have our breakout rooms. Maybe we can do this a little more, or we can just start it in our journal and kind of access this way of thinking about when and how do I presently grieve? How might I create more avenues for grieving? When can I allot time for grief? Where will I grieve? How will I grieve? What tools or rituals will I use? How might others grieve with me? Might I invite them in? And what will support me to grieve regularly? Because it's not part of our culture. We have to actually consciously create this. So this is something that I suggest, we don't have time to go through it now. I suggest that maybe you can spend some time with this on your own, or in groups with friends, or during our time together, we can chat about this a little more too. So we're not going to do breakout groups, and we're not going to do takeaways. And I will say, though, that this is a whole system that goes round and round and round. To allow grief, we want to be able to think about this great turning that's happening, change the way we're thinking, take this opportunity, share and collaborate with others, cause systemic changes, and allow grief. So I've also put resources on here, and that's the end of our slideshow. And now, if you want to unmute, we can just come back together, and please be wiggly, please stretch, please get water, do what you need to do, and questions and answers, feedback, sharing, anything you want.